Now, Revelation 21:7 says, he talks about this time, this millennial kingdom, and he says, those that overcome in this lifetime will be able, they're the ones that are going to inherit all things. So overcoming is huge. Those that overcome here and now are going to be able to inherit all things in that kingdom to come. Now, the Greek word for overcome is the word nikao, Nikao, and it means to subdue. It means to conquer. It means to gain victory over something. And there are three things that God wants us to overcome. Three areas God wants us to overcome. Number one, in the physical sense, he wants us to overcome the world. He wants us to learn how to overcome the world. We're not of the world, but we do live in the world. So the first thing is to overcome the world. In the soulish sense, which means mentally and emotionally, he wants us to learn to overcome the flesh, and that's where the sanctification comes in. That's what we battle every single day, is how do we overcome the flesh? And in the spiritual sense, he wants us to overcome the devil. And there's been such confusion in this overcoming the devil. There's been abuses on both sides, and we're going to cover that. That's why this is such an important lesson. Another definition for overcoming that I love is freedom. The word overcoming can also mean freedom. Freedom from the world, which is our circumstances and others' responses. How would you like to be overcome so somebody responds back to you negatively? You can just stay free. That's what God wants us to do. Freedom from the flesh, which is our natural thoughts and emotions. How many of you want to stay free from the thoughts that triggered us to go down in the pits? Free from that. Freedom from the enemy. God wants us to overcome in these three areas. Now, he has given us his authority and his power to overcome in these three areas. And that's the greatness of the power that we're going to zero in on from Ephesians 1:17 and 18. He's given us his authority, his power to overcome. But the problem is whether we choose to use that authority and power. That depends upon our moment-by-moment choice. I would love it if once in the morning I could choose to go God's way and I would stay there all day. It doesn't work that way. It's moment by moment by moment. We choose to rely upon his authority and his power. 1 Thessalonians 4:3 tells us it's God's will that we use his authority and his power and that we stay sanctified so that he can use us. But unfortunately, it is our moment-by-moment choice if we want to do that or not. So despite what some teach, I believe overcoming, just because we're believers, does not mean we're going to automatically overcome. Boy, wouldn't that be wonderful? I've met people who really believe that. I am a believer. I've been a believer for 40 years. I've overcome for 40 years. And I've had to say, well, boy, something's really wrong with me because I've been a believer for 55 years, and I have to learn to depend upon Christ every day to overcome. And I think that there is a positional status of it, that positionally we're overcomers, yes, but experientially we need to learn to overcome every single day. So I do believe that maybe they're talking about positionally we're overcomers, yes, when Jesus comes in, because Jesus is the overcomer. So yes, we're all meant to be overcomers because Christ lives in us, but not all of us are because we haven't chosen to use the authority and power that God has given us to overcome the world, the flesh, and the devil. And also, the second thing is we haven't chosen to lay our wills and our lives down. God can't use us unless we're open and clean vessels. That includes my will and my life moment by moment. And that's what it means to be sanctified. Then Christ can overcome through us. Unfortunately, in difficult situations, a lot of us do just the opposite. When we're hurting or stressed in some way, we don't surrender our wills and our lives as we're supposed to. Instead, we make emotional choices, don't we? We follow our flesh. We're hurt. So we run and we go into a corner and we, justify ourselves and all of this stuff. Make emotional choices to follow fast. Or we make our own plans and our own devise our own rules and regulations and put up our own boundaries. How often, there's books on boundaries that you put up. If that boundary is not instigated by the Spirit of God, it's a work of the flesh. Everything we do needs to be instigated because we're clean, we're sanctified. Spirit of God is going to be able to speak through us and tell us what boundary to put up. Or we try to overcome the world, the flesh, and the devil by removing ourselves from it. It's easy to be spiritual when there's nobody else around. Do you agree? To be a nun or to be, to go and lock yourself up someplace. And yes, that would be easier. But life is just not that way. Life is full of conflicts and challenges and obstacles. And God doesn't want us to run away from these things, but to learn to overcome them. Hebrews 4:11 tells us that life, the Christian life, is full of striving and laboring, and that's part of the overcoming process. Therefore, if we want to have purpose in our lives now and also want to have positions of responsibility in that future coming kingdom, in the millennial kingdom that Chuck's been talking about, it's essential we learn to understand how God designed us to overcome.